and now knight to e5. And you see all these threats beginning to build against white's position. Welcome back to Chess Dog. I'm John, and today we have an exciting game from the FTX Crypto Cup between Quang Liem and Alireza Firouzja. This is a game where there's a lot of action in an open center, and pieces are kind of flying everywhere in the middle of the board. I hope you enjoyed the game. Quang Liem has white, Alireza Firouzja has black. Let's jump right in. Lee begins with d4, knight f6, c4, e6, knight f3, d5, and knight c3. Firouzja has played the Queen's Gambit declined and now plays c5. This looks like a regular Tarrasch defense, but this actually transposes into what's known as a semi-Tarrasch after cd5 and then cd4. Now there's a gambit line called the Hennig-Schara Gambit. This looks like that line, but it's actually quite different because after queen d4, this knight is defending the queen. In the Hennig-Schara Gambit, black would play knight to c6 and take advantage of this pin, but there is no pin because the queen is defended, so it's a different line. After ed5, now it looks like black's pawn on d5 is incredibly vulnerable, like it's just lost, right? After a move like bishop to g5, you remove the defender of the pawn, but that doesn't work because after bishop e7, bishop takes knight, bishop takes bishop, you can't take the d5 pawn because of this move. Bishop takes c3, check, removing the defender of the queen, and after pawn takes, white would lose the queen, so that move doesn't work. In this position, e4 was played, and then de4. Knight to c6 is the most commonly played move here, but white seems to be doing well from this position. Firouzja takes on e4, and that invites a queenless middle game, but with lots of pieces and lots of complications. Firouzja's king, as you see, is stuck in the middle of the board, but for the time being, he does have the extra pawn on e4. Knight to g5 attacks that pawn, but also threatens knight to f7 check, getting that pawn and also picking up this rook. So Firouzja says, I'm going to play bishop to e6. I'll defend this pawn at f7 and go ahead and let white take this pawn, but he doesn't. After knight takes e4, after exchanges of knights, bishop to b4 check, this is a totally equal position. Black has nothing to worry about here. So Quang Liem decides to complicate matters by taking on e6 with check, and pawn takes knight. So now, black still keeps his extra pawn, but those pawns in the center are a little vulnerable, they're weak, and white has the two bishop advantage, as well as the fact that black can't castle. So white's going to try to make some hay with that. Bishop to d2. Now here, Firouzja plays a novelty. He plays knight b to d7. In a bit of an irony, this position was reached once before, and black played knight to c6, long castling, you see placing the rook opposite the king. But after king e8, bishop b5, rook h to e1, you can see white is well centralized and doing well. The irony is that the player with the black pieces in this game was Quang Liem himself, the one who has the white pieces here. Giri had white in this game, and Giri won this game. I think that might be the reason why Quang Liem decided to play the white side of the opening in this game. But Firouzja does not play knight to c6. Instead, he plays knight b to d7. That blocks the d-file if white decides to castle long. b3 to play bishop to g2 and try to recapture that pawn on e4. Rook to c8, bishop g2, bishop to b4. And now knight takes e4. He recaptures the pawn, but after bishop to d2 check, knight d2, we see that white's two bishop advantage is now gone. All he has is this one weakness to work on, but as compensation for that weakness, black has an active rook on the c-file, so the position is dynamically equal. King to e7, and here the best idea for white is probably to just grab the pawn. And after rook c2, knight b3, to play from this position, this is probably white's best option, but instead he plays king to e2. And what this does is allows Firouzja to penetrate into the position with rook to c2. And you see the rook is on the 7th rank, it pins the knight at d2 and threatens the pawn on b2. b3 to protect that pawn, and here Firouzja is not concerned about the b7 pawn. He wants to get a lead in development and get active pieces going, so he plays rook h to c8. And here, the best move is probably just rook h to d1, but instead, Quang Liem goes ahead and grabs that pawn, and rook 8 to c7, the computer likes this great idea, rook 8 to c3, and when the bishop retreats, knight to c5, b4, knight to d3, and black is really all in white's position here, Firouzja plays rook 8 to c7, hitting the bishop at g2, the bishop retreats, and now knight to e5. And you see all these threats beginning to build against white's position. First of all, he's threatening rook to d7 to pile on to the pinned knight on d2, also threatening to put a knight on g4 that could cause some threats to f2 and h2. Rook h to d1 to defend that knight. Rook d7 piles on it. Black is more active. And here, Quang Liem plays a4. The one trump he's got in his position, the one thing he has to work with, is a queenside pawn majority of 2-1. So at the very least, he begins to advance his pawn majority. The knight jumps into d3, this time supported by the rook at d7. a5, pushing that majority, and now knight to g4. And just the pieces are just all over Quang Liem's position, threatening to take on f2. Bishop to e4 was played. Probably bishop to f3 was the best, but after knight f2, rook f1, black is still clearly better. White plays bishop to e4, knight g to f2, bishop takes d3, knight takes d3, and now he still has his very, very actively placed pieces. And the best white can do here is rook a to b1. That sets up a little trap, because here it would be a mistake to play the obvious move knight to b2. That looks like it's winning for black, but actually after rook b to c1, white completely neutralizes black's advantage. The reason is if the knight takes the rook at d1, white would take the rook at c2, everything trades down, and white would have neutralized the advantage. But what Alireza would almost certainly do instead of knight to b2 is play rook to d5. And now, after, say, h4, knight to b2, here rook b to c1 doesn't work, because rook to e5 check pushes the king away. So if, say, king to f1, now knight d1, and he can't retake on c2 because of this move, knight to e3 check, forking the king and the rook. But instead, white plays rook to a4. Now, it's time for our fork alert. Do you see the fork? That's right, knight to b2. Forks the rook at a4 and the rook at d1. The rook moves back to a2. It does pin the knight to the rook on c2, but now e5. And the threat of e4, e3 is pretty much impossible to meet because white is so tied down. If the king moves away, he'll lose the knight. And if the knight moves, the knight can't move because it's pinned. Everything is just tied down. So king to f3 was played. The idea is that he can't be checked after knight takes rook here. Rook d2, and black is up a piece and clearly winning. Rook d2, b4, knight to c4. Of course, that protects the rook. White doesn't want to exchange rooks, but then knight to d6. And that keeps control of this square, and even the queenside pawn majority here just can't advance anymore. And in this position, Quang Liem resigned and Firouzja won in this game. A really interesting game, and included a strong novelty, and just really cool to see all those pieces flying around in the middle of the board. Thank you for joining us at Chess Dog. See you again soon. Bye.